Folks, this episode is brought to you by QUANT Wrestling. QUANT takes the Moneyball approach to the sport of wrestling. They have an app that's available on the Google and Apple Play stores where you can find all of their Division I wrestling data. They track 500 plus stats for each match, timestamp them, and then upload them into the QUANT app. Really fantastic tool. Download it now at QUANT Wrestling on the Google and Apple Play stores. Use the discount code WCML to get your first month free.
People are like, why'd you go to West Point? I was like, well, I was in journalism class and I was sitting next to Liz Miller. And Liz Miller, extremely attractive, like very, very attractive. 10 out of 10, Ryan, 10 out of 10. Saw her a couple years ago, still 10 out of 10. So I'm sitting next to Liz and I go, hey, Liz, I got a call from the coach at West Point last night. She's like, wow, that's really cool. That's why I went right there.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast. This is your host, Ryan Warner. So good to be back with you all on this Monday, February 21st, coming to you live from the Windy. Our guest today is Greg Warren. Greg is a stand-up comedian. He's been a professional for 20-plus years. He's a regular on the Bob and Tom Show. He's been featured on NBC's Last Comic Standing. He's the man, and before that, wrestled at Missouri, was an All American at Missouri. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, this wide-ranging conversation with Greg Warren. Fan of the Week goes to our friend Steven Rodriguez. That's at SRod141 on Twitter. An All-American for Illinois back in his heyday. Steven, thank you so much for listening to the show and all the support. This episode's presented by QUANT Wrestling. Download the QUANT Wrestling app now in the Google and Apple Play stores. Use the discount code WCML to get your first month free. And without further ado, let's give it up for the great Greg Warren. Peace! Well, since we're already rolling, we can just dive on into it, man. If you're
good. Man. Yeah, go ahead. I'll roll with it.
No, it's an honor to have you, Greg Warren. I'm a fan of your comedy, and I'm so honored that you listen to the show and that you're here on the show with us.
Yeah, man. You got to keep this thing going because I've been trying to get back in shape, and really the only way for me to stay on the elliptical for an hour is to throw one of your episodes on. So they got to keep coming out, man. Yeah,
no problem there. I'm gonna keep doing them for as long as I can. It's really fun to do it, and it's all a part-time gig, but I spend way more time on it than I should. And
I think that Matt Gaffari episode was one of the most entertaining pieces of media I've ever heard. I mean, it was insane. Just the stories he was telling. That was nuts. I mean, like you almost see the film right there. You could make a feature film out of that. It was great, man.
It's funny you say that. I think about that all the time. Like there's a short film I'm doing this summer on this Iranian wrestler who's been on the show, who escaped during the revolution. Then my next short film, I would love to do one called The Karelin Cup and interview Gaffari, Lin, and just do like a short 20 to 30 minute, really tight documentary on that whole experience he was talking about. Cause it's freaking crazy.
Yeah, I found you. I still remember, I can't remember. It was a couple years ago. I think it was during COVID or whatever. But my old ex Mizzou wrestler, he was actually real good friends with Ben Askren, a guy named Joey Garrity. I ran into him at a coffee shop when we were talking wrestling. And he was like, "Hey man, you got to listen to this Smiths documentary." And I loved it. I loved it. And I was around at that time. Like I wrestled Pat in college. I sent it to my buddy who's a writer on a lot of CBS TV shows. He wrote on Mike and Molly. He wrote on, what did he recently? That thing with Matt LeBlanc recently. And now he's for the first time, he's show running his own show. It's coming out in a couple of months, but he's a showrunner. He used to be a comic, and he was an ex-wrestler. He loved the Smith documentary.
Wow.
Yeah. And that got passed around a little bit at CBS. There's a guy that works in sort of the Chuck Lorre world I think he runs Bob Hart's Abishola. And he thought it was great too, man. And he's not even a wrestler. So
wow.
That's really, really good stuff, man.
CBS, I'm waiting for you. Give me a call.
Let's man. They just might, Ryan.
Let's do it. I hope so, man. That's awesome. We're actually, finish working on the next audio documentary now that'll go live in April. It's an Illinois story, but ties in all kinds of elements that I think a lot of people will like. So it's a fun process and a fun journey. Let me ask you about probably one of the key defining moments in your journey. What did the folks at Procter & Gamble say when you said you were quitting to be a stand-up comedian?
Oh, that's really interesting. So my boss was this guy named Rob DiMartini, and he was a really sharp guy. He went on to run New Balance. He was a pretty smart guy.
Wow.
And I was doing like project work in the general office at that time, a lot of stuff with Pringles and I think a little bit with Jif maybe. And he knew I was thinking about becoming a comic. I'd been doing it off and on sort of as a, moonlighting second career. And I finally was getting where I'm like, okay, I'm not terrible at this anymore. You're terrible the first 5 years. You're just terrible. It's awful. So I was getting like, well, this is actually going pretty well. And I'd done a couple of, when in comedy, I'm giving you a long answer to this question.
That's okay.
So in most like road comedy, there's a host, the guy that goes up and does like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and he's local, and they don't pay him hardly anything. And that's how you, after about 5 years of doing open mic nights, maybe you get to start doing that. So that was my role at like 3 different clubs in Ohio. I was that guy. And it's not fun. Everybody's, ordering drinks. They expect you to suck. A lot of times you do anyways. And then there's a middle guy, and that guy, he does about 30, and he's, from out of town. They give him a hotel room, not a lot of money, but, that's the sweet spot. It's the easiest spot on the show. And then you got the headliner.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been doing the MC spot forever, and I was, it's not easy. And I felt like I was getting better. And my friend who owned a club in Dayton, Ohio, gave me this weekend to be the second guy. And I don't know if you know who Kevin Pollock is.
I was going to ask you, is this the Kevin Pollock story?
Yeah. Kevin Pollock was like he was the headliner that weekend. And Kevin had just done like A Few Good Men and some stuff like that. He was the show was sold out all weekend long. And it was like one of my first times being the second guy instead of the first guy. And man, I loved it. And I got back into the office that Monday, and I was like, I knew on some level that I was not going to be able to stay too much longer. And I was making, really good money. I was 10 years at Procter & Gamble. I had profit sharing. I had stock options, and I was, but I felt like all I was doing was talking about, what we were going to do for lunch and when I was going to retire. And I was only like early 30s. I was like, I'm too young to have given up on everything.
It's funny you say that, because I knew a guy who was at the same position as you at Procter & Gamble, Richard Hearn, who went on to be the CEO of a very successful company out of Dayton, Ohio. But I didn't realize that these PM positions at Procter & Gamble were like one of the biggest jobs you could get, and they just launch pads for so many people.
Yeah. I don't know if I was on that trajectory, Ryan, but I was.
But you were in one of those roles and kind of moving up the ladder, right? I mean, you had moved up over 10 years, and you were.
I'd moved up. Yeah, I'd moved up quite a bit, but I was probably on I don't think I was on Richard's trajectory. It was a flatter angle. Maybe I was destined for middle management, very comfortable middle management. But yeah, so I finally went into Rob and I was like, hey man, Rob, I want to leave the company. And it was the coolest thing ever. Cause back in those days and probably still, P&G was pretty good sales training. So there was headhunters calling you like every couple of months. You'd get headhunters calling you, be like, hey, do you want to go work for Boston Scientific or Johnson & Johnson and like all these different companies? And Rob goes, is this about comedy? I'm like, yeah, man. He goes, he points behind him. There's like this row full of books. He goes, there's like 5 manuals back there that tell me how to talk you out of going to work for Johnson & Johnson or Boston Scientific. He goes, as far as I know, really nothing back there about stand-up comedy. Good luck to you, buddy, man. And it was pretty awesome. Yeah, he's a great guy.
How liberated did you feel pulling out of the parking lot that day?
Oh my God, man, that was crazy. It was funny because I was like 33 at the time, and for the last 10 years, I off and on had done comedy. We'd be doing shows at night and, maybe we'd meet some girls or those guys are going out for drinks and we're hanging out and they would be like, hey, we're going to go to this other bar with these girls. You want to go? And I'd be like, no, man, I got to get up and go to work. Like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then, like, I don't know, a couple weeks later, I'm doing a show somewhere in Iowa, and hey, you want to go out with these, go meet these girls at this bar? I'm like, no, yeah. As a matter of fact, yeah, I do. It was because it was, I had plenty of fun in college, but I did wrestle I did wrestle there, and I listened to a lot of the athletes on your show, and I wish I would have. I took it very seriously, but I probably didn't do things exactly the right way. I have a lot of regrets, but we had a lot of fun, but still I went right from being a D1 athlete to, corporate America. And there was plenty of fun to have, but nothing like the freedom of being a stand-up comic on the road. I just basically lived out of my car that first year. It was pretty fun.
Wow. And so I can't believe that you move up from doing the MC role to the 20 to 30 minute guy. And that seems like a pretty big jump up. And right away, you get to do it in front of, as Kevin Pollock's the headliner. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I forgot, Pollock was really cool. He he took me aside and, we talked and he's like, when I told him that, I worked at, I sold potato chips basically. And he was like, he goes, hey man, you could do this, like you could do this full time. And it was really, really cool to do. Yeah.
Dude, you had to walk away from that feeling like I feel after you tell me about the CBS people. That's like very exciting, and that you guys all enjoy it so much. So yeah, that had to be such a boost in your cap, man. Yeah, it's funny. There's another guy, and I've told this story a few times recently. In fact, I want to shoot another special this summer, and I'm trying to get this guy into it. But there was this guy that owned a comedy club in Columbia, Missouri, where I went to college and wrestled. And during the summers, when I wasn't wrestling, I would work at the comedy club. And it was owned by this guy named Freddie DeMarco. And Fred was this, like 100% New York Italian guy. He owned a bar in the middle of Missouri. Some people thought it was like witness protection. I don't think it was, but and Freddie he treated me like a son, but he was, he was going to kind of get me ready to be a comedian. I thought I was going to be a comedian when I got out of college. And man, I moved to Chicago, Ryan. I got out. I went to NCAA's my senior year and it was over, and I had graduated the year before. So I was just taking grad school classes, but probably not attending as many as I should have been. And I was like, all right, I'm going to move to Chicago and be a comedian. And I just couldn't handle how you have wrestling from the time I was 5 years old through college. And I had like this, you just have that purpose. And then I was just lost. I went from, all the structure to zero structure. And I was just like, I don't think I can do this. And I need to get back to some sort of structure. And I left Chicago real quickly, went back home, started interviewing, and got the job at Procter & Gamble. But Freddie was going to kind of help me get started in the business. And, he had actually set me up with a job in Chicago and was going to call some clubs. And so I had to call him and tell him, like, Freddie, I took a job at Procter & Gamble. Like, Craig, what are you doing, man? You're going to be bored, man. You're going to be, Craig, I just fell asleep between the words Procter & Gamble, Greg. What are you doing? And I'm like,
no, Fred, I'm telling you, they're giving me a company car. I was like, yeah, Greg, you give me a company car, man. That's how they trick you into selling soap for the rest of your life. I'm like, I'm not selling soap. I'm selling peanut butter. Oh, peanut butter. Why didn't you say so, Greg? I mean, wow, that's a lot of excitement there. Greg, get in your company car, drive it off a cliff. At least you have 5 seconds of fun before you hit the ground. He told me that. And he would always, I would go back to, to watch Mizzou wrestling matches, on vacation or the weekends. And every now and then I stop in and do a set at his club. And here comes the soap salesman. A guy gave up comedy to be a soap salesman. I'm like, it's peanut butter. And it is. Nah, whatever. It's selling soap. And then that day that I quit, I did not want to call my dad, Ryan. Like he was, he was, I know what he would have said. So I called Freddie, to tell him. And I was like, hey, Freddie, I did it, man. I full-time comedy. I quit Procter & Gamble. Greg, why would you do that, man? They give you a company car, man. That's a good job. What else do you want? I'm like, you told me to do it. Greg, I told you to do it a long time ago, man. I mean, you're getting old, you're supposed to be bored at this point of your life. I mean, I don't know. Greg, comedy, not a lot of stability in comedy. People don't need it. You know what they need, Greg? Peanut butter. I mean, that's what you need. Yeah.
That is awesome. I'm so glad you brought up the trip to Chicago because I was going to ask you about that because I had heard on another podcast, you go to NCAA's, a lady in your life is no longer in your life. You moved to Chicago and you did it for 2 weeks and you quit. And I'm like, holy crap. He quit and then revives himself. So I was going to ask you, so when you moved to Chicago, what were you doing? Were you working at a club or you did a couple of
I was like
nights and
you got to understand, I wrestled in college for 5 years. And so, I was right off of D1 nationals. And at that point, my goals were probably not as high as I placed my senior year. And I was thrilled with it. I was, I kind of, but yeah, I had gone through a breakup like right before nationals. And so I was like kind of out of it. And my buddy was going to the Art Institute of Chicago, one of my best friends, a kid I grew up next door to. And I just stayed with him. And, I was just drinking beer and not really, I don't know. I went to like an open mic night and I met this guy who was like an older guy. And you could tell like comedy had not really completely worked out well for him. And I got scared, because I lived a pretty straight arrow life with wrestling. And I was good at school for the most part. And I was like, I don't know if I want this guy's life. I want to, and I was still hurt from the girl. And I was like, I want to get married and have a family. And I just kind of ran back to the structure, and I, a lot of times I regret that because, I thought, who knows where I would be if I would have just started then, but also, things have a way of working out, I'm not, if I would have started comedy at 21 years old, you don't have a lot to talk about when you're 21 years old. And I lived that 10 years with, selling peanut butter and doing different things. And it's like, I have maybe a little bit more to talk about. So,
right.
Yeah.
That's just, I love that you went back to it. How long after you were down in Texas and, you're doing the sales gig and you're moving up, how long then until you started going back and doing regular sets?
It was off and on. I was kind of living double life. When I got down to Houston, I think pretty quickly I found the open mic scene. But I was also very serious about, my job and I was doing okay at it. And so, I think I did it a few times and then, like I said, it's tough. And, it doesn't sound like most of the guys on this podcast,
No, I love that.
I know, but I feel like a little bit of a quitter because it's like I faced adversity a couple of times. Like I'm not good at this. I shouldn't do this. I need to get back to what, I think I had a couple of rough sets, and I just was like, I'm not good at this. I need to get back to what I was meant to do. It's sell peanut butter and have a family or whatever.
Serious business. Right?
Yeah.
Serious
to make
man.
it exactly. It's like wrestling. Let's get down and nose the grindstone. And I regret that a lot. But
once you moved to Cincy, had you been going back to it full time then?
Once I had moved to Cincy, so the first 5 years were in Houston, and probably that last year I was in Houston, I was going up, at least 2-3 times a week, and I was investing some time, but I still was nowhere near thinking that would be my career. It was just a very serious hobby, and I was okay at it. I wasn't great at it, but I was, I was doing okay as an opener. And then I got transferred to Cincy, and it was a big job. It was, it was a promotion, bigger customer. And most of the time I was in Cincy. I think maybe I remember one time I did a week in Indianapolis, and man, I ate it hard all week long. It was a rough club. And I mean, and I thought I was getting better at that time. I was the first guy. And I mean, I ate it so hard. And one of my high school buddies, this guy, he played for the Bears for a while, a guy named Jay Lewinberg. He was a center for the Bears and mostly for the Colts. They came in to play Indy, I think, or maybe he was playing for the Colts at the time. But anyways, they were in town in Indy, and I knew his parents, and they came to the show, and Jay came to the show. Yeah, I had an NFL player at the show, and I ate it so hard. And I remember driving back to Cincinnati like the next day being like, yeah, I'm a peanut butter salesman. Like this is, and then I don't know, maybe 6 months later, I started taking it seriously again. And at that point, I caught a little bit of fire and started to figure some things out. It's interesting because there's a lot of help from wrestling. You gotta, you are going to take a beating, and you need to sort of dust yourself off and get up. I just told you about a few times when I didn't, but I also did a lot of that. But there is sort of an intensity to wrestling that you do not need to bring onto the stage. And I think early on in my career, I was almost like in a modified stance when I was doing comedy. That's terrible. A couple of my friends, like Freddie was like, Freddie, you look like you want to fight the crowd. What are you doing, man? Yeah. I was like in a square, I was like, you're a little too tense. And I kind of learned to relax a little bit.
The feeling you must have before going on stage. And I've heard you say, like, in your first 5 to 10 years, you're just so afraid of bombing that once you know you're not going to bomb, then you can start to have a little fun up there. But the feeling of anxiety before you go on stage must be insane.
Yeah. It was insane. And there's times when it's like, probably for TV appearances, I don't have it ever, unless it's like a TV appearance when it's like, you have to get this right in 5 minutes or something like that. Mm-hmm. Even like shooting an hour special, you're shooting it. It's on tape, man. They're going to edit it. And you're going to do another show and kind of edit them together. So it's like, okay, if I screw up, I have a whole hour to get them, but a couple of TV appearances, like Last Comic Standing, or like doing some of the talk shows, it's like, this is 5 minutes and it can't go wrong, mm-hmm. like, and I have gotten nervous, but I don't know if it's ever been that sort of anxiety that you have before a match, because there's nothing like, I don't know if I ever got over the fear of just gassing, we trained hard, mm-hmm. extremely hard at Missouri. But you get gassed out a few times early in your career. Like, I don't want to ever feel that again. It's like when I watch, like when you watch Tom and Terry wrestle, it's like they wrestle with reckless abandon and they have no fear of getting tired.
So
and
crazy.
I guess, yeah. And now when I'm doing a club set, like if I'm doing a club set on the weekend, I'm just going up to do an hour. Like I worked in Fayetteville, Arkansas last weekend, and I almost have that arrogance that those guys had when they were on the mat, where I'm like, it's an hour. Like these days, I'm not saying it will never go, poorly again, but I know 50,000 tricks and I have a lot of material. Like if it does go poorly, it was probably meant to go poorly, because mm-hmm. I know too many. Like if it does go poorly, I don't know if there was much I could have done about it, because I know a lot of different levers to pull. But yeah, that fear of getting tired, I don't know. I think I apologize. I've done a lot of different podcasts over the years, or shows or whatever. And I probably repeat some stories, but I mean, one of the worst experiences of my life was, we wrestled in that West gym at UNI my first year at Missouri. And I wasn't in the lineup that much that year because I got hurt, but for some reason and the guy in front of me was really good, a guy named Mike Gilsdorf, Illinois guy, actually. But I wrestled for some reason, and they were good. They were ranked like 3rd or 4th that year. And I I got, you know how that gym is, man. It's just everybody's on top of you. And there's kids going up, handing people papers, and you open the paper, it says you're going to lose. Like 8-year-old just hand you a kid that said you're going to lose, you know? And so, and I don't think I knew, we cut a lot of weight back then. You know, it was on duels, it was 5-hour weigh-ins. So you know, in tournaments, it was night before. So you could float a lot of weight. So, I mean, I wrestled this guy named, I think his name is Pat Hogan. And he got on top of me, and I just ran out of gas, man. I just didn't have it. And I was on bottom, and the ref was like, he was like a Def Jam comedian playing to the crowd. He started hitting me. Like I don't know how many, I didn't get stalled out, but I must've got close because he hit me a few times. And on the last one, I'm on the bottom, you know, and the guy's trying to work a bar, and I'm not going over, but I cannot get up. And he bangs on the mat twice. He goes, "Are you okay down there, son?" And the crowd laughs harder than they've ever laughed at any of my comedies. They're like, "Yeah, this guy's hilarious." And yeah, then that our coach was just, he was not happy with me at all. Luckily, like a lot of guys on my team didn't do well that night, but he was not happy with me. And I mean, I was pretty good. I was like the captain the last 2 years. I worked pretty hard. I did well. And, he liked me. He loved me, man. I love coach, but I swear if I had one bad practice, he would bring that up. I mean, we're talking like 4 years later, "Warren, this reminds me of when you laid down at Northern Iowa. It's an embarrassment." Couldn't we just forget about that? You know,
seriously.
And
that at least you're honest enough to know that it was fear of being tired and not fear of something else. Like a lot of people don't even know what the issue is of why they're so nervous, you know, before like a big match.
Yeah, I think it was probably fear of being tired and probably a little bit of undiagnosed OCD. You know, God, the guy that I wish I would have known, you know, he's a lot younger than me, but I've gotten to know him over the years. Like, if you ever hear Terrell Delagnev talk about some of, you know, a lot of wrestlers have some sort of crazy OCD notions that when you challenge them, they're like, well, this is stupid. You know? Yeah. You're
just
not...
heing the name Terrell brings a calm to me when you're talking.
It does, man. I told him, I ran into him in an airport one time. I was like, "Hey man," I go, you know, we know each other a little bit. I was like, "Dude, some of the stuff you said on this podcast with Ben just completely just pierced right through." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was me, man. It was my mind playing tricks on me, you know?"
Yeah. No, he's awesome the way he thinks about it. And like just so much of the stuff like we know now as people who are trying to do well in our fields, like you just wish you knew a tenth of it back during the competition days. Like I remember thinking like before a big match, I'm like, I wish Joe Williams could morph into my body and go out there and wrestle for me. Like, that's what I used to think. And I'm like, who's thinking like that before a match? I remember that several times thinking that though.
Oh, I thought insane stuff, man. In college matches. I mean, you know, in big matches that I won, I was like my mind, I, you know, that's the other thing about your podcast. Like I listened to so many and it's just like, what were you thinking back then, man? All these, like, if I could have just known, and I know Ben really well now, we're both Missouri guys. I'm like, if I could have just talked to him, probably even though he was like in the 4th grade back then, he still probably could have educated me.
Yeah.
Which I'm an idiot.
How often, like, you listen to Ben, he's all about like improvement and learning new things. Like, I can't tell you one new thing I learned after the 7th grade. It was like the same 9 skills just going.
Yeah.
I never thought to learn anything new. It's like,
I learned a lot in high school and I learned, you know, a lot in college too. And none of it was like my coach's fault. Like it was all my own, like probably not enough intellectual curiosity and mixed with a little fear of gassing, mixed with I just like to wrestle and didn't like to drill, which I've learned now from your podcast is pretty stupid. And part of it was I've watched some college practices, you know, we went a lot more live than they do now. And I think part of me was like, dude, we're going to do an hour and a half of live coming up. I don't want to wear myself out during this drilling, you know? But you know, I did learn a lot of stuff in college through osmosis. Coach Roper and Coach Whalen, like I learned some, you know how in college room, there's some stuff like I don't remember learning it. I just remember all of a sudden I could do it. Like all of a sudden I could cut off leg attacks. All of a sudden, when a guy had a single leg up in the air, it didn't faze me that much. And I don't remember actually just like those guys beat it into me, which is probably how you're supposed to learn.
Right.
But when I was in high school, my dad was my high school coach. So he gave me like a really, really good foundation when I was younger for the kind of, high school coach that didn't have a lot of wrestling in college would give you. But when I was in high school, there's a junior college that's like a mile from where I'm sitting right now, where I grew up, called Merrimack Junior College. They don't have a wrestling program now, but I would just go up there, like pretty much in the spring and the summer every day, or I don't know, they had workouts to it. I was wrestling junior college guys all the time. And it was a lot of, it wasn't structured workouts. You just be like, hey man, could you show me how to do that? And you show me how to do that. And if I could have kept that level of, curiosity and eagerness to learn going through college, I think maybe I would have, I'm happy about where I wound up. There was probably some guys that better than me that didn't wind up there, but I think maybe I would have optimized myself a little more, maybe even enjoyed the sport a lot more.
You hang out with a guy like Yanni for a couple of days and you're like, I don't know anyone who has this much fun learning and executing wrestling as this guy. I mean, he kind of reminds me of the 165 pounder now at Missouri, Askren's protege. O'Toole. Like both those guys are like, man, they're just savants. They're loving it. It's like a totally different approach. I just love that those kind of kids are coming up now, and those are what the youngsters are going to be watching.
Yeah, I just had a thought. Is sort of at the right times. That's what comedy is for me now. So I remember like fooling around with a cheap tilt one summer up at the junior college. I think it was probably between my sophomore and junior year. Just in not like, oh, this is some silly technique that I'll never use. Just fooling around with it. And then you start, when you get against a guy in practice and you're bored and he's not very good, you just do that. And then you get against a guy in a match and he's not very good. You're like, I'll try this thing, and you get it. And then all of a sudden you're doing it in a match against somebody that is good. And then you're doing it in the state semifinals. And like when you first start getting really competent with it, not when you've perfected, but when you're just like, I can see where this is headed. It's the most exciting time of your life when you're a young wrestler. And for me, it's when I have a new bit that like, it's like the bits that work, like, yeah, that's great. It's fun. But I did that, like it's like, this thing isn't even like, I just hear like half the crowd laughing and I'm like, I know there's something here. And I haven't figured out the wording. And I need to pull some words out and I need to mess around with it for another 3 months, but I know this thing is going to work. And there's no more fun for me than that.
When you get there, are you listening to it, writing it down, and then retyping it to like tighten it up? Or how are you like tightening up like the 5 minutes of a bit there? Well,
it's a really good question. I mean, I do a lot of different stuff. Like I try to journal in the morning. It's just, just free write, just cursive, with a pen, on a notebook, just keep the pen moving. And then if there's something that occurs to me as sort of interesting, it's impossible to come with something that's funny. So it's like, is this interesting? Is this something that doesn't usually happen or I don't usually think of? I just put it up in the margin. And then I go back and I pick up some of those with another exercise and just sort of try to make the premise like 1% funnier or 1% more relatable, or I try to add something to it. Because if you start thinking about how can I make this joke right now funny enough to be, on a comedy special, it falls apart. You're not, it's too much pressure on the thing. So it's like, how can I make it just a little bit better? And then you sort of find a seam, you find something that you can say. And these days I'll just say, if I have any idea that I think is half funny, I'll just do it on stage. And then I listen to almost every set, I just, nothing fancy. I just record on my iPhone and I listen to the sets and I'm like, okay. And, at that point, it's not a lot of, once I get there, I don't do a lot of, typing or writing. It's more just by the ear and talking on stage. I may make a note like, get rid of this word, say that word, add this word. And, I think Seinfeld said it takes about a year to get a bit right.
Wow.
Now for me, the best way for me to make a bit perfect is record it on a CD or a comedy special And then about 3 weeks after that, I'll figure it exactly. Yeah.
Then it gets ready, right?
Right when it's too late. That's exactly when I'll find out how to make it perfect. Yeah.
How big of a jump was it to go from the 20-minute sets to filling an hour?
It was, I'm trying to think, for a while, it does become, it's about time. Like now it's not about time. It's just about coming up with better material and coming up with new material. But for the first several years of your career, it's like, I just need to get enough time. And sometimes you make the mistake of being like, that means I should make this thing bigger. And almost always you need to make it smaller to be funnier. So yeah, it took a while to get there. And then there's some little things in the clubs. Like when you go from being the middle guy to the headliner, you have to close the show. You have to follow somebody who's pretty good. And then you have to deal with a check drop, which is, when you're first starting is like terrifying because basically you're doing well. And then all of a sudden nobody is paying attention to you for about 5 minutes. They're all looking down. They're all paying their bill and they're talking to their friend. Like nobody. And it's like it's the least big deal in the world. You know, the other thing that everybody think is like a big deal is you kind of need to learn to talk to the crowd every now and then. Like just sort of improvise and talk to the crowd. And most people think like, well, that's the hardest thing about comedy. It's not, it's just a thing. It's kind of like learning to cut off leg attacks. You just eventually learn it. You know, like at some point, run the pipe seems so foreign to me. And like, I will never get this. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I know how to do this. And I can't tell you why I know how to do this. It's talking to the crowd is more of a skill than an art, but yeah, that check drop, it's, when you're first starting to headline, it's scary, man.
I never, when you said that at first, I'm like, what? Like in terms of you getting paid, you're talking about the crowd, like signing their bill and they're getting the hell out of there.
They all get their bill and then, nobody is listening to you. And it's this weird thing. And every club does it differently. And some clubs are worse than others. And, you know, I at first you're thinking, well, I'm just going to do the greatest bit in the world to make them look up from their check. And then you realize now they didn't look up and you wasted your best bit. That's the other thing. I just thought of something when I was starting to like feature on the road, when I was being the second guy on the road, I don't know, early in my career, you can kind of surf in between big, like you kind of have these big bullets, you know? So, you know, I would go into like, sometime they sent me to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I was a little in over my head, but I was like, I can get through this. You know, I'll just, I got my 6 big bits and I'll space them out, you know, and then in between I'll kind of coast and it won't be quite as funny, but then I'll hit them with this, you know, maybe I'll talk to the crowd a little bit, kill some time, you know, and then back then it was like, I had to get to like 20 minutes, which, you know, is nothing to me now, but I was like, you know, it's like 20 minutes is a long time when you're in over your head. So the first night I get in there, I mean, Ryan, in the first 5 minutes, I've used all 6 of the big bits and they didn't work. So I was like, okay, you guys, you thought that you hated that. You don't have any idea how bad this next 10 minutes is going to be.
What do you do in that situation? Are you up there sweating and you're thinking about it?
Oh yeah, it's terrible. It's awful, man. It's the only thing better than, you know, getting pounded in a wrestling match is like, at least you're not, you know, physically beaten down.
Right.
But yeah.
Oh my God. I love the creative process and I'm a massive fan of stand-up. And so I'm curious just about all these kind of like process questions in your journey. And I was like, just thinking about it, you know, over time, I'm like, man, going from the 15 to 20 minute guy to the 60-minute guy is crazy to me. And I always wonder, like, do you just have it so mapped out in your head that you know where it's going? And are you spending a lot of time thinking about it in your head? Like when you're driving to shows?
At first you do. And now it's, I don't think about it at all. It's
right.
You know, I have enough material in any situation to cover it. But yeah, when you first start headlining, you do. The other thing is to get from like the first guy or to get from the second guy to headliner, you have to have the time. But these days, and even back when I started headlining, you have to have a little bit of you can't just be funny. Like you have to have some credits. Like you can't just be, well, this guy's really good, we're going to move him up. it doesn't work like that. So I had to you got to get a little bit of TV that they can advertise, or, I think the thing that I had a couple of TV appearances. But the thing that put me over to where I started headlining was I had a bit I did this national radio show, the Bob and Tom Show.
Yeah. And
I told a story about wrestling on there, and like, for some reason, their listenership, it's a big Midwest listenership. It's all over, but they loved it. And like, that bit kind of exploded, and they put it on a CD that they used to, put out every year. And like, that bit alone just sort of kind of made me into a headliner over the next year.
Did the Montreal Comedy Festival come after that or before that?
No, that was before that. Yeah. That was like the first, I got that like a year after I quit my day job, and that was a pretty cool break. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, no, I'm familiar with the Bob and Tom Show. Used to listen to it in high school, and then my mother, massive fan, and will always call me when you're on the Bob and Tom Show. She's like, "There's this wrestler." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get him on." And then my mother, soon to be mother-in-law, massive fan of the Bob and Tom Show. She talks about it like I don't know what radio is, because we're so into podcasts and like Spotify, but I'm like, yeah, I know what that is. But
yeah. So
that was kind of your first entry on there, and now you've been like a staple with those guys. I mean, you must have gone there hundreds of times since then.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Those guys are great. That's I call their
the Monday.
Every Monday I call and do a little segment on there, and they've always been fascinated with the wrestling stuff too. So it's really cool.
Yeah. You just never know what those guys are gonna say when you bring up wrestling, and you're just waiting for it. But
yeah, they're some of my best friends now. When I first went in there, I was terrified, because I was like you, I was in sales, so I was out on the road listening to them on the way to a call or on the way to the office. And, and then the first time I got to do it, I was like, oh, I remember, just being really nervous, and I just went right into the wrestling bit. And luckily it worked,
Worked out.
Tom was fascinated by my ear, like he just could not get over that I had a cauliflower ear for like the first 5 years I went in. That's all he would say. This is Greg Warren. He has a cauliflower ear.
Well, man, it's so cool that you're out there representing wrestling, and just, you're everywhere, man. I was just, going down the Greg Warren rabbit hole before this. And one of the things I did not know was the Wes Wesley.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that until like today that I made the connection. I'm like, holy shit, that's the same. I'm like, obviously that is one of the funny, the bit I'm thinking of, or the video I'm thinking of, is when you're at Nationals, you go up to Randy Lewis, you go up to the Askrens, and then Royce Alger, and it's
Royce threw me down. Like
he took it seriously. Yeah.
Right. Royce bear hugged me to the floor. It was in Omaha, man. That's
what it was.
Yeah. So that character, I still remember when we did that. It was Ben. I'd run into Ben. He was still wrestling at Mizzou, I think.
Okay.
Or he might have been a grad assist. But I went up to, I'm pretty close with Brian in the program. And I was up there, and Ben was like, hey, there's this new thing called Flow Wrestling, man. And like, he didn't prep me or anything. He was like, he just turned on the camera, was like, say something funny. And I was like, I don't know. I did some bit. And then like, I got all these responses, I didn't know what flow was. And then about, I don't know, 6 months later, I was down in Austin doing a show, and Mark Bader, who's a buddy of mine, and Joe Williamson, who's a friend of mine. And I called Ben. I was like, he's like, call Joe. So I called those guys, and I was like, hey, I got like a CD coming out this year, and let's do some promo stuff for the CD and see if maybe on Flow. So we did like basic, sort of like just a basic interview, kind of like we're doing now. And we told some stories, and I did some bits, and I remember we were in the lobby of the Austin Comedy Club, and I go, hey man, I got this really stupid idea about a guy that like always wears his headgear, and he's like 40 and he's obsessed with wrestling. And we just started shooting it, and we went all over Austin shooting that thing. And then I think like the second one we did, it's funny. Are you familiar with the comedian Nikki Glazer?
I've heard the name. I don't.
Yeah, she's this girl. She's very attractive, and she's like kind of famous. She's extremely famous now. She's like the host of F Boy Island on HBO. She's in a bunch of Netflix specials. She was in, like, she probably was 20 years old, and she was in the second Wes Wesley video.
What?
Yeah. She's like in the second Wes Wesley video is like Wes is on a date with her at at lunch, and he pulls out a picture of like the guy that beat him in high school. So then the one you're talking about, I still remember that because it was at Omaha, and Max was in the finals, and me and Joe were just shooting stuff, and Ben was like, "Hey man, let me just take you around. Let's have some fun and shoot a bunch of stuff." So yeah, I remember shooting it with the best one was Mark Schultz.
Oh my God, that hit on the headgear looked like it hurt.
Yeah. So I start pummeling and sparring with Mark Schultz. They had told Mark, "Hey, do this thing with this guy." They didn't explain much. So Mark and I start going, and at that point I was out of wrestling for 15, 20 years, but I could still, pummel, not with Mark Schultz if he wanted to kill me, but
right.
We're just kind of wrestling around and sparring and hand fighting. And I walk out, and Mark goes to Ben. He goes, Hey, come here, man. He goes, "Hey man, that guy, he kind of knew what he was doing a little bit, and Ben was like, "Yeah, man, he wrestled in college." Like Schultz thought that I was like a Make-A-Wish kid or something that they were like bringing around. He thought that I was just like some guy they were bringing around to like, meet the guy or whatever. He didn't get God. Mark. And later I had sort of connected with him, and it was fun. He was really, really cool dude. But yeah, that one, Alger like threw me on the ground, and I was worried because we were screwing around with Max like that whole day. Like we were shooting stuff with Max and doing all the screwing around. And, I was like, man, if he loses tonight and Brian and this video comes out and Brian sees that we were like screwing around all day.
Oh my God.
Kill me, man. But Brian was like, no, that's probably the best thing you could have done with Max is like get him out of his head. And
the stuff when you're doing the what do you say, red alert, and he has to keep his elbows in, and you're like, 7 men could get through there. Dude, that was so funny. And then just the head that gets, it's not only headgear, it's like the worst headgear too. Like,
I know.
No one wears that headgear.
Well, we found it. Me and Bader and Joe found it in an Academy Sports in Austin, Texas. At that time, Texas didn't even have sanctioned high school wrestling. They had it. I coached on there for a little while, but it was not sanctioned. So like it's not like if you walked into Des Moines and went to a sporting goods store, they're going to have all kinds of wrestling shoes and stuff. They had this headgear that probably was left over from 78, and it was like the only one left. So we just got that and we kept it. Yeah.
Dude, that is just so funny. And like to me to think about, you have this comedic background and you're just so willing to lay it on the line. You started at freaking West Point. How did that happen?
Jack Spates, man, that's how that happened.
Really? He was out there.
Jack was the assistant coach at West Point, and he's he's a good recruiter. And
guy sold the hell out of you, huh?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, Jack said, "Hey, Greg, you come up here. It's gonna be great, man. You're gonna love it, Greg. Greg, you're gonna love it." And, yeah, Jack tricked me. No, I don't know. I felt like I went there maybe. Probably for some of the wrong reasons, but I felt like there was everybody was impressed by it. When you're a kid and you're a senior in high school and you're like, I think I might go to the academy. Everybody's like, this is half true. It's probably 3/4 true, but people are like, why'd you go to West Point? I was like, well, I was in journalism class and I was sitting next to Liz Miller, and Liz Miller, extremely attractive, like very, very attractive.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10, Ryan. 10 out of 10. Saw her a couple years ago, still 10 out of 10. So I'm sitting next to Liz and I go, "Hey Liz, I got a call from the coach at West Point last night." And she's like, "Wow, that's really cool." That's why I went. Right,
that was
there.
it.
Yeah, that's the yeah. To be clear, we didn't hook up or anything like that. No,
that's the last time you spoke to her.
Yeah, no interest in any of that. Yeah. But I was like, well, Liz was impressed with it. It must be a good idea. So I went, and I'm glad I went. I stayed for the full year, and Coach Ed Steers was the head coach there. He's another great guy, and it was a good experience. Yeah.
How like rigid was it there compared to
Extreme. Now, I don't think it's quite that way now. They got rid of some of the stuff unnecessarily. Now, I was hurt. Like I had back stuff, and I was like in the hospital, like basically on bed rest for like 6 weeks, which got me out of a lot of stuff. So I have to remind myself, I'm like, I went through the whole first year, and it's like, No, Greg, you actually didn't. You were on bed rest ordering pizzas while everybody else was, yeah. But it was, one of the hardest things I've ever been through. It was brutal. The wrestling part, it was great. But it is one of those things where, everybody's yelling at you all day long. I mean, all day long. And so that by the time you get to practice and coaches, now those guys weren't the type of guys that would yell at you, but if they did, you're kind of like, yeah, coach, get in line, sorry, man. I've been yelled at 34 times. I really, and they were not that way. They were really, really good guys. But yeah, after a year, I just sort of decided I think mostly I was sort of worried about, I wanted to have fun, for one. I was a pretty straight-laced kid in high school, and I wanted to have fun. And two, I was like, you go there for 4 years, and then you owe them 5 years after that. And I was like, when you're a kid, that seems like such a long time. Oh. Like at that point, I will be by the time I get out of here, I'm going to be like in my late 20s. At that time, my life is almost over. I'll probably just stay for another, 15 and retire. And it's like, it seemed crazy at the time to me. And, I'm glad I went. I have a lot of respect for, ultimate respect for what those guys do.
Do you owe anything when you go for just a year, or you're good?
Back then you can leave, the day you set foot into class on your junior year, you have a career in the Army. But the first 2 years you can leave.
Good to go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I, like most people, didn't leave when I left. Most people left like after basic training or after the first semester. Once they made it through plebe year, most people were like, okay, it's smooth sailing. And I was like, no, I don't think I want to do this.
I love your risk-takingness, Greg. Like you may downplay, but man, you were like just going all over the place, like really taking leaps of faith. And I mean,
I wish I could have wrestled like that, Ryan.
I know, brother. I feel you on that. I do. I mean, even you think about some of the things you've been a part of, like Missouri wrestling. How much has the popularity of Missouri wrestling grown since your time there? I mean,
amazing.
They're just Brian Smith, one of the great coaches of our time. I mean,
I think he is. Yeah, I think what he's done there is insane. I mean, we were in the Big Eight, and we were the fifth best team of 5 in the Big Eight. But the teams ahead of us were Iowa State, who was really, really good back then. Oklahoma State, who was at the top. Oklahoma was extremely good back then, and Nebraska was really good. So like really good. So we were the 5th best team, and we were not a great team, but we weren't a bad team. Like we were probably a top 25 team. Mm-hmm. We were top 20, top 25. We were not a bad team, and man, we wrestled a tough schedule. And my Coach Roper, I really respect him because Brian has taken the program to just amazing heights, but Wes did build some stuff there. He was he got the program fully funded, kept it alive. And, he was a really loyal guy. And, man, he was one of those guys, like you were mentally tough. If you wrestled for him, you were either going to quit or you're going to be mentally tough. And man, we wrestled a tough schedule. It was like we had that Big Eight schedule, and then every year we would go to the Northern Open, which was most of the Big Ten schools. That was on Thanksgiving weekend, and we went to the Midlands, and we went to Vegas a lot too. So
did you go to the St. Louis Open back then?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
that was a big one.
Yeah,
I mean, the Open schedule alone back then, like you said, it was like the UNO Open, the UNI Open, and that St. Louis Open, and that's like before the dual season even starts, and that would have been 15, 20 matches.
I wrestled Pat in the finals of the UNI Open my senior year.
Smith?
Yeah, Pat Smith. Yeah.
Wow.
And that Open was cool because if you got a sweatshirt if you placed in the top 3.
There you go.
Like blue sweatshirt, red sweatshirt, and I think a yellow sweatshirt. I got the red sweatshirt.
That's the tournament where freaking Alan Freed drives up, hits a deer during his redshirt season, and beats Tom Brands, who's the defending national champ. And,
that might have been the year I was. That might have been there. The year I was there.
Yeah, could have been. Yeah.
I wrestled a guy in the semis, I think, who was at Iowa at the time. He was a redshirt, but he went on to pit. A guy named Rich Conolano, who I think wrestled Freed back in the day, or he was, I don't know. he was tough, man.
Yeah.
And Pat was, I wrestled a lot of good guys, and some of it was just painful and brutal. Pat, like, it was weird because it's like, okay, it's the third period and I'm down, I don't know, 11-4, and I'm not tired. I'm not, I don't feel beat up at all. I'm just about a step behind every time, it's just, you're always off balance and you're always a couple of steps behind.
Yeah. I mean, you wrestled so many guys because like you said, your sophomore year, you qualify, junior year, you're a blood round guy, senior year, you make it onto the podium. But I heard one of the guys you scrapped with during your tenure was a guy I'm always fascinated by, Brian Dolph. What did it feel like to have Brian Dolph put his hands on you back then?
That was, man, I still remember, I think I wrestled him, I'm guessing junior year in like one of the opening rounds, either first or second round. And he was like Pat, and that he was always a step ahead, but he was also pretty physical. Like it was not Pat. I'm sure when he needed to be was physical, but Brian, it was physical, man. Like you were getting beat on a little bit. And I was just behind him. And I remember that match, man, because I remember, maybe that was sophomore year. I think it was sophomore year. I can't remember, but I was, my dad, I could hear my dad in the stands encouraging me. And it was kind of cool.
Wow.
Because like my dad was my high school coach, and, he switched at some point from coaching me to just being a guy that was a fan. And, no wrestler, nobody on your show, but you have mostly champions, unless they're idiot comedians come on your show. But nobody talks about some of this stuff. Like, some of us didn't exactly have the right mindset all the time,
Right.
So like I was in that match and I was going hard, but was I confident I could beat Brian Dolph? No. Did I think that most people in the entire arena knew about what was going to happen in this match? Yes. So I'm just like, this is not fun. And I'm giving everything I got. And I remember hearing my dad, be like, come on, buddy, you can do this, hang in there. And
that's cool.
Yeah, it was a really, really cool moment. It's one thing. It's like the stuff that you can edit this out if you want, because it probably shouldn't be on a wrestling podcast. But it's some of the stuff that Tervel talks about being honest. A lot of times I don't think I felt like I could be honest. But, when most coaches are like, hey, man, you're going to take this guy. You're going to take this guy. And you're like, yeah, man, I got him, coach. And in your mind, you're like, I don't got him. Yeah. In your mind, I mean, this is a terrible thing to say, but I'm being honest with you. There was a couple of times when I'm like, yeah, man, coach, I'm looking at the numbers on this deal. And this guy, not only did he beat me before, he beat 7 guys that beat me. And the last time wasn't even close. So, I mean, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear here, but if this was a lie detector test, I'm going down hard.
Yeah. And
that's a terrible mindset. And I'm sure there's a way to be like, hey, this is how I feel. Maybe somebody could be like, okay, that's how you feel. Now let's see what we can do with that.
Massage this.
Yeah. Or maybe Tervel would have been like, no, really, Greg, actually, even the honesty thing doesn't work with you. You're pathetic.
Well, knowing you got to such a high level and like still thought that way, like the amount of people who struggle with this kind of self-talk or like limiting belief is endless, So I'm glad you said it, because it's funny, but it's true. And it's like sad for most athletes to think that, it's like, it's true though. It's just how many of them are out there, And the reason I asked about Dolph, man, is I did the Slaying Saitiev documentary, and
I loved it, man.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, he wrestled Slay in the final. He was his coach, right?
He was his coach, and he wrestled in the Olympic trial finals. And all anyone says was like, "Oh my God, Dolph was like a wild man. He was a killer. He would like beat you up." And I didn't really see any matches from his early career when he was at IU, and so I was always wondering what was he like. And so I just stumbled across a Brian Dolph match with you guys, and I was like,
it's funny that you said that, because there's a lot of guys that I wrestled, and I could tell you like defining characteristics. Like I said with Pat, it was a combination of that sort of low single, high C, where they're going down to their knees, and a head snap, and all 3 of them, you're just always off balance.
Mm-hmm.
Dolph, all I remember was just really good, solid solid wrestler, pretty physical, solid technique. I wrestled, the guy that you had on, worked out with me, Steve Barrett. He'd come in and work out.
Oh my God. Steve Barrett. Awesome.
Yeah. Barrett, they brought him in. He was a farmer in Missouri.
That's the farmer?
Yeah, that's the farmer in my last comedy.
Farmer story on the Flow thing. Steve Barrett was the farmer.
Steve Barrett is the farmer. I did in my last comedy special. It's Steve Barrett is the farmer. Steve was a farmer in Warrensburg, Missouri, and one of my best wrestling partners, Darren Davis, got in a car accident that year, and he couldn't wrestle anymore. And coach was like, I worked out with Roper all the time, and that was tough enough. There was a guy named Sean Fry who was coming in as a freshman who wound up being a finalist, who was tough. But they wanted somebody else to work out with me, and they brought in Steve, and he came in like every Tuesday. And like that guy, I really enjoyed listening to the episode with him because he is the most unorthodox wrestler I've ever wrestled. It was nothing like I'd ever seen before. Like very, very unorthodox. It must have been somewhat what it's like to wrestle Dave Schultz or something like that. But he did a lot of like just crazy stuff, and he inflicted pain on the top. Like it was like he inflicted a lot of pain, and I heard him talking on your show about, what he's done for athletes in action. And, he talks a lot about his relationship with God. And I'm like, yeah, I wonder what God thinks about what you were doing to me.
So you, the first time you work out with him, though, you had no idea of his credentials.
I knew he was good. And that's one, I think I have probably exaggerated for comedic effect. I knew he was good, but I really did I was a senior. I had lost in the blood round the year before, and I'd wrestled a couple guys close that were good. And he was old. And I was like, this guy's coming in, and he had Onitsuka wrestling shoes from like 15 years before. And he had these old gray shorts, and when we were drilling, he just sat down and didn't do anything. And and then Roper's like, go with Steve live. And I go, you want to warm up? And he just stood up, and he slapped his right leg, and he slapped his left leg. And his stance, Ryan, was not a wrestling stance. It was he was like he was standing straight up. It was almost like a modified Greco stance. And I really at that point was like, I'm gonna beat this old man all day long. What's he doing? I'm a college athlete. And it was very quickly, man. Like he does this thing where he jumps up in the air and he grabs like sort of a chin head. I mean, I know technique.
Yeah.
I don't know what he did. He did like a chin head thing, and he just throws you over, and then it's just God. It's like kind of a modified Legs-esque thing where it's just all he's doing, and just elbows always in your neck or your face, or he was very angular and like
pointy.
Pointy. Yeah. Like
very
there's
pointy.
Always something sticking, and you're like, oh, it's brutal. Even Roper, who was a really tough, he's a really, really tough guy. Wes was like, hey, Steve, take it easy on him. It's like he thought he was going to rip my arm out of my socket at one point. I never heard Wes say that ever. Yeah.
And Barrett's like, he's hard, man. He's been living in Eastern Europe. Living like a monk, basically. I mean, the guy is just all business.
Yeah. The thing is, he's a really sweet guy. I mean, I'm sure that did come over on your interview. He's a really sweet guy. And it was kind of a cool thing when I placed at nationals that year, he sat in the chair with Wes.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he sat in the corner with Wes on a couple matches. It was kind of cool, man. Because
that's amazing.
At that point, he'd been sort of out of it for a while. He was farming, so I don't think he'd been back to NCAAs in a while. It was pretty neat.
And I'm thinking about the timing. Like the Soviet Union was probably, when was your senior year?
91.
So it was just about to go, and he went back.
He was about to leave, right? I think he left about 6 months after that when I was listening to your show.
For like 15 years after that.
Yeah.
That must have been like, you're probably the last U.S. guy he coached, probably.
Yeah, I think he was just disgusted with the efforts of American athletes after coaching me. And and was like, okay, I need to go to Dagestan where people have some sort of intestinal fortitude. Yeah.
Dude, those guys are so tough over there. Well, Greg, man, it's been so much fun to chat with you, brother. I just, I'm so glad to meet you and to have you on the show, and I can't wait to meet you in person. Are you going to NCAAs this year?
I'm not. I got a gig. I go probably every 2 to 3 years. I am going to Big 12s though.
Okay.
My dad and I are going down to Big 12s. I can't wait. It's the first year Missouri's been back in the Big 12, and it's going to be a great tournament. And hey, man, keep doing what you're doing. It's great for the sport, and it may get me back down to fighting weight. So yeah.
Oh man, that's our ultimate goal right there. So if that happens, mission accomplished. No, it's and if you're ever in Chicago, let me know. I'd love to come by and
I will
see a show. Thank you so much.
I will be. All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Folks, this episode is brought to you by QUANT Wrestling. QUANT takes the Moneyball approach to the sport of wrestling. They have an app that's available on the Google and Apple Play stores where you can find all of their Division I wrestling data. They track 500 plus stats for each match, timestamp them, and then upload them into the QUANT app. Really fantastic tool. Download it now at QUANT Wrestling on the Google and Apple Play stores. Use the discount code WCML to get your first month free.